Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Furman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. What will we aim for after retirement, or do we even retire at all? Do we choose to grow and change as the world grows and changes, or do we sit in our recliners and complain? If you're part of the baby boomer generation, then you belong to the largest generation thus far of the U.S. population that is retiring healthier than any generation before. And that means retirement is starting to look a whole lot different. My guest this week on Vox Novus, Ron Pevny, has for 45 years been dedicated to assisting people in negotiating life transitions as they create lives of purpose and passion. He's a published author and the founding director of the Center for Conscious Eldering based in Colorado, which for 20 years has presented workshops and retreats across North America to support people in bringing purpose, growth, and commitment to service to their elder years. His website is centerforconsciouseldering.com, and he joins me this week to share the 10th anniversary edition of his best-selling book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. Please join me in welcoming to Vox Novus Ron Pevny. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you, Victor. It's an honor to be with you today.
Ron, what is conscious eldering, and how is this different from positive aging, successful aging, healthy aging, and other approaches to aging that are getting a lot of attention in media these days?
Well, I think modern society's, modern culture's view of aging is indeed changing, and I am so grateful for that. It's long overdue because we have had at least 2 or 3 or 4 generations when there was definitely not any kind of an empowering vision for aging for people to aspire to. And that's beginning to change, and I think that's really great. I'll say a bit first about some of these visions, if you will, for aging, and then I'll contrast it with conscious eldering. I think that's the most effective way to do it. You know, a lot of people who pay any attention to the media and who are interested in how we age will be familiar with terms like positive aging or healthy aging or active aging or successful aging. There's so many different names, but I think they're all referring to an understanding that as we age, there's tremendous potential for continuing to be active, to have lives of meaning, to be engaged with the world rather than just drifting off into isolation and irrelevance. And I think that is incredibly positive, and I applaud all of that. Conscious eldering, which is what I teach and have been committed to for a long time, goes a step further than that. And it doesn't look just at what we have the potential to do in those post-retirement years, but it takes a look at who is the person who is going to be doing whatever we choose to do. It really focuses on our own growth and development in the latter chapters of our lives, so that whatever we may choose to do, we can bring strong, clear energy to it, not dragging a lot of old baggage from the past. We can bring a kind of resilience to our aging that enables us to continue to find purpose and meaning even when or if, and for most of us, I think it's going to be if, we end up losing a lot of our physical abilities. Because the fact of the matter is that in spite of what some of the anti-aging advocates tell us, most of us are going to suffer physical diminishments, physical losses and breakdowns, perhaps mental losses and breakdowns. And conscious eldering posits that if we can grow into the elder that is possible for each of us, and we'll be talking about that, if we can bring that elder forth in the latter chapters of our lives, then even when we suffer losses and diminishments, there is going to be a strong sense of purpose and a strong sense of meaning, because we know that we are not just our ability to be active, but there is something deeper inside of us that is our real essence. And conscious eldering helps us to get in touch with that truest essence of who we are.
How did you recognize your call to be a guide to conscious eldering?
Well, I've had a call, Victor, since I was about 30 years old. I first recognized a call to support people in moving through life transitions and in using life transitions as an opportunity for, for real growth as we move from one life stage to another. And I guess I first recognized this particular call in a dark night of the soul. And I think for most of us, probably, it's some of those dark nights of the soul we have when all of a sudden we first become aware of what is most important and what is truly calling us. And I became aware that I came most alive and that I helped other people come most alive when we're in the natural world. And so back in, I guess, 1979, when I was finishing my graduate work at the California Institute of Integral Studies, I ended up going on a kind of a self-designed vision quest with a few friends. I had heard a few things about vision questing. I didn't know much about it, but we went up to the mountains, Mount Shasta in Northern California, and we spent several days, much of that time alone, fasting, really seeking clarity and vision for what's next in our lives, because all of us felt we were in a major transition. And I had one of those experiences there that it's impossible to put into words, but I absolutely knew that the gift I had to give to the world is helping other people in times of transition to get in touch with their most authentic, deepest vision for who they can be, for who they can grow into in the next chapters of their lives. And, once you become aware of your calling, then life tends to support it. So not long thereafter, I met Stephen Foster and Meredith Little, who are generally recognized as, I guess you'd say, the grandmother and grandfather of the modern rite of passage movement for non-native peoples. And I had an opportunity to apprentice with them, and I began to offer my own wilderness rite of passage experiences for people. And then I knew that was it. That's where I made a real difference and where I was most alive. And so fast forward about 30 some years, and I got in my early 50s, and I began to realize that there were various rites of passage experiences around for young people moving into adulthood. There were some for people in midlife crisis and things like that. But there was nothing to really mark that passage, which is so big, from work life, midlife adulthood, into the next stage, which I recognize and know is called elderhood. And so right about that time, I got invited by two wise elders, about 15 years older than me, to join them because they also had a vision for creating some kind of a rite of passage into elderhood. We joined together and we began to create retreats that were some of the first of their kind in helping people use the power of nature, with some good, strong guidance and the support of community, to actually envision what it can be like to move from retirement into an elderhood of purpose and growth and passion and service.
The path that you're describing includes what we call synchronicity, something that I found that when I've made a conscious choice to pursue something, a number of opportunities would come my way. Is that what we're talking about?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Synchronicity played a big role. And when I take a look at the people around me who are making a real difference in the world, And I've had the opportunity to interview a bunch of these people for a program called Turning Points that a colleague and I did in the past year. And in every case, it seems that when people have a strong sense of where they are headed, what's important to them, all of a sudden the most unexpected occurrences happen to support them. It seems to be purpose and intentionality and synchronicity are really linked together in a beautiful, mysterious way. And yeah, so there have been some wonderful synchronicities that have supported me in moments when, especially in some of those darker times, Victor, when I just couldn't see a way forward, or I was just really, feeling stuck or feeling like I was getting nowhere. And at those particular moments, something unexpected happens that it's almost like grace touching you and saying, "Hey, I'm here to support you. Just hang in there. Keep doing what you know you're called to do, and you'll be supported."
Absolutely. As we discussed before we started the interview, in 2018, my mother in law passed, and my wife at the time looked at me and said, "Now we're the elders." And in 2020, my mother passed, and again, my wife looked at me and said, "Now we're the elders." What's the difference between being old and being an elder?
But the work that we do, I think that one of the ways that we bill it and we speak about it is that this is work that is for people who are committed to growing into elderhood and not just growing old. I think the difference is that, as has been the case throughout most of known history in societies around the world, up until, maybe the Industrial Revolution, the more modern age, um, it was understood that there is a distinct stage in human growth called elderhood. And it wasn't just that, as people got older, somehow got more gray hair and wrinkles, that all of a sudden they somehow become elders. But rather, it was a life stage that required some intentionality and some effort and some work to fully move into. It was a life stage in the growth of the human psyche and the growth of the human person. And I strongly believe, in the core of our work, is that there is an elder in each of us, an archetypal elder, if you will, that seeks to emerge when we get somewhere into the, roughly around retirement age. And its emergence doesn't happen all at once. I mean, it's a gradual emergence. And as this elder emerges with our intentionality and our own work, gradually more and more, we more and more fully move into this new life stage. And it's a life stage that I believe it can be the pinnacle of our personal and our emotional and our spiritual growth. It's a life stage, as has been the case, throughout history, where we feel called, and the community around us expects us to live not just for ourselves, but rather to be thinking of the well-being of the generations to come, to be thinking of the well-being of the community now. Some people call it generativity, but it's a whole new commitment to how we live our days that moves beyond just our own well-being or security or comfort, but that really does look at themes like legacy, themes like how we can be making a difference for our world now and for our descendants, generations down the road. It's a beautiful life stage that requires some work to fully embody in ourselves. And that's the difference between elderhood and just old age.
The elder has always been respected in indigenous and tribal cultures. Why has there been such a tendency to downplay the elder in Western society?
Well, that answer, Victor, I think is so multifaceted, and I can speak to a couple of a couple of the reasons. I think one reason is that in traditional or indigenous societies throughout the world, throughout history, there has been a deep, deep connection with the earth and with the rhythms and cycles of the natural world. That's where people lived. And so they learned about beginnings and they learned about endings and how endings were necessary in order to lay the groundwork for new beginnings. They saw that in all of life around us, in nature. And when you see that, then and when you're embedded in that, then you see that it's the same in human beings, that we have life stages in our growth, and that this growth always requires the end of one stage, some kind of a significant letting go of aspects of who we have been to create the space for the new chapter, for who we can become, to begin to emerge. They saw that. But in the world we live in that is so removed from the natural world, we have lost touch with many of these natural rhythms and cycles in ourselves that are integral to who we are. And so when you lose touch with that, then you just kind of see life as one big continuum, and changes happen, and you just kind of do your best to make your way from one experience to another. But it's almost like the same person is just kind of moving on year after year after year after year. And that is such a different vision of human nature than a vision that really sees and understands that life has cycles and has rhythms. And so when we've lost touch with an understanding of these rhythms in the human life cycle, it's real easy to see that, for instance, as we go through midlife and then maybe we get into retirement, that then the next thing is just to continue to do the best we can to live, actively and with as much joy as we can, basically to keep living as if we were in midlife as long as we can until we can just no longer pull it off. And then someday will come when we either just, are too old or frail, or we die, and then it's over. And so there's no room in there for an understanding that there is a whole stage in human development after midlife adulthood that can be incredibly rich and growthful, but we've lost touch with that. And so therefore, the role of elder is not something that is recognized. It's not honored as it's always been in so many societies. It's hardly spoken of, except maybe as being the first part of the word elderly. And we all know all the connotations of the word elderly, which are certainly not something that people can aspire to or look forward to.
Why do you consider it so crucial that the role of elder be supported and also honored in modern society?
I believe it's so crucial because we have tens of millions of people just in the United States, who are past retirement age. And the statistics show I've seen between 10 and 12,000 people a day reach the age of 66. There are a huge number of people who are reaching this particular point in life. And these people have a lifetime of skills, a lifetime of experience. In many cases, I don't think all, but in many cases, a lot of wisdom. And to me, I think it's a travesty to think of tens of millions of people with gifts to give who can make a real difference in our world when we need everyone's gifts, and perhaps especially the gifts of people who've been around long enough to have seen some things and have some perspective. We need those gifts as a society. We can't just, relegate these people to the bingo room or to whatever and think it's only the young people who are going to be able to help us move forward into a viable future. When we see all the many, many challenges around us, we need the gifts of older people.
Absolutely. My guest is Ron Pevny. We're going to be talking about his book, the 10th anniversary edition of Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. Ron, please share with our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
Well, Victor, my book is available most anywhere that books can be purchased. Again, it's Conscious Living, Conscious Aging, Claiming the Gifts of Elderhood. I encourage people, because this is the way that can best help to support my work, I encourage people to purchase my book if they're interested through my publisher, Beyond Words Publishing. And you can just Google that, and then you could find information on how to purchase the book. But it's available most everywhere.
And your website, sir?
My website is centerforconsciouseldering.com. I know that's a lot. centerforconsciouseldering.com. A lot of articles on there, a lot of interviews, a lot of what people consider really meaningful information about aging with purpose and passion.
And we'll be back with more of Ron after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
More than 24 million Americans have an autoimmune disorder, and that number continues to grow. I'm Sharon Saylor, and I'm one of those 24 million. To put that number in perspective, cancer affects about 9 million and heart disease up to 22 million. That's why I've brought together top experts and those thriving regardless of their diagnosis to bring you the latest, most up-to-date information. Join me, Sharon Saylor, Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, for the Autoimmune Hour on Life Interrupted Radio to find out how to live your life uninterrupted.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of Om Times Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour.
if you could find a way,
To get inside.
each other's mind.
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out, and for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Hi, this is Bill Maher. I can find humor in almost anything, but one thing I never laugh about is cruelty to animals. If you don't get the joke either, write People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, 501 Front Street, Norfolk, Virginia, 23510.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for inspired conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Ron Pevny. We're talking about the 10th anniversary edition of his book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. Ron, what does it mean to age consciously? Does it mean to bring clear intentions to our lives as we age, or is there more to this?
Well, it does indeed, Victor, mean to bring clearer intentions, but I think there is a whole lot more to it. So, to me, growing in consciousness means growing in awareness. And let me talk about some of the awarenesses that I think are so important in our human growth, and especially when we enter the later chapters of our life. Being conscious means having increased awareness of what is our own true inner voice, what is our own truth, as opposed to all the many other voices and messages that we have internalized that have come from our parents and have come from the society around us that have told us about who we should be, what we should aspire to, what should be important. So it's becoming aware of what is most authentically us. To me, becoming increasingly conscious means to become increasingly aware of those shadow elements in us that we all have that disempower us, that sap our energy and our strength. Often, because they are in the shadow, we're not aware of them. Those are those elements in us that can really derail us as we make choices and we set intentions for how we're going to be living our life. To me, becoming increasingly conscious means becoming increasingly aware of our interdependence with all other human beings and with the whole community of living creatures on this earth. And the more we're aware that our well-being and the well-being of all those around us are deeply intertwined, the more we are going to, at the deepest gut level, have a deep, deep commitment to giving our gifts as best we can to help support the well-being of everything around us. And so I think the purpose, the intentions that we live for are very much guided by what we become aware of as we become conscious of all of the needs around us and our role in all of this. And one more, I think becoming increasingly conscious is becoming increasingly aware that we are more than just our personality and our ego selves doing what we do, but that there is a deep spiritual essence in each of us. It doesn't matter to me what we call it, but a deep spiritual essence that is living in this body, in this personality, in this ego that we have. And I think that awareness is especially important as we age, because as we lose our physical abilities, as we lose the abilities to do those things that our personality selves and our ego selves have found really important and have gotten joy from, as we lose them, then we have the opportunity for this inner essence, this spiritual self, to come to the forefront, to grow, to be more prominent in our lives, to guide us. And I think that's the source of the kind of resilience and the kind of healing and the source of the vision for how we can best give our gifts that really characterize people who have grown into true elderhood. So all of those, to me, are aspects of what it means to become more conscious. And as we increase in consciousness, then the choices we make in this precious time we have left are going to be more in alignment with what is most true to us and not in alignment with what we are told by the world around us should be important or should be valuable to us.
I find personally many of these answers when I do a life review. Why is life review important in aging consciously, and what are the productive ways to do such a review?
Well, life review, I think, is incredibly important because if we aspire to whatever we aspire to, in the years ahead of us, the old saying, Victor, well, wherever you go, there you are.
Yes.
If we, like most of us, who have been wounded by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, most of us have internalized a lot of disempowering stories, about ourselves from our experiences in the world around us. Most of us have a lot of baggage. And this baggage, it takes energy. It takes energy. A lot of us have a lot of resentments, a lot of things that need forgiven in ourselves or in others. And it takes energy to kind of hold on to resentments, for instance. A lot of this baggage takes energy. And if that energy is being used to deal with stuff from the past that we have not recognized and somehow healed or let go of, then that energy is not going to be available to us as we age. And inevitably, aging is a time in life when our energy does wane. And so we want to make sure that our energy is as clear as possible to put into wherever we really feel most called to place our energy, but not have it be stuck in the past. And so I think life review is very much certainly about seeing what we're carrying with us that needs to be let go. But it's also very much about getting in touch with what we have learned through a long life so far about what is truly our most important gifts. I call them signature gifts. What makes us come most alive? Where can we make the biggest difference? Where do we get the most satisfaction? What are our strengths? And having that awareness really, really then helps us to have clarity about what's calling. How can we shine? How can we make a difference? How can we really thrive in the years ahead of us? First, we need to see this journey we've come on. What have we gained from it? And then what is it that we indeed want to take forward with us, while at the same time we let go of some things that really do need to be let go. And so you asked Victor about ways to do life review. And there are a lot of ways to do life review. I think it's just built into human nature that when we end up getting into, around retirement age, 60s, 70s, for some people even before, we begin to find ourselves more and more thinking about the past. I think it kind of naturally happens that we want to be looking at our life and seeing what this journey's been and seeing what we've learned from it. That naturally happens. But for a lot of people, they don't pay much attention to it. And for a lot of people, engaging in some kind of a structured way of doing life review can be really meaningful. One way that I really like was one that was taught by Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, who wrote the seminal book From Aging to Saging. And he encouraged people to make a commitment over a period of, several weeks or months to have writing time with themselves. And during this writing time, he suggested break your life into 7-year segments. And he liked to think of it like the first 7 years are the January of your life. The next 7 years are the February, the next 7, the March. But break your life into 7-year segments. And as you think about each segment, reflect on and write about what most stood out for you about that segment of your life. Who were the people that were most important? What do you think were the most important things you learned about yourself and about life? What were the biggest challenges you faced during that particular time? What were the moments when you were most joyful? Looking at each chapter in that way, as you make your way all the way up to the present, we begin to see a whole unfolding process of a life, if you will, and we begin to see certain threads that have been woven through this, certain kind of experiences that have come up now and then and again, that kind of help us to see what is integral, what are the threads that have held our particular life and our own particular journey of growth together. And so doing that kind of a review can be really, really helpful for a lot of people. Now, I was just going to mention one other, Victor, and that is that people can spend time writing a perhaps 3 or 4 page, carefully written, what I call a legacy letter. There's some people have other names for it, but basically, imagine that you are writing a letter to a descendant, to a grandchild, or somebody who may never actually know you in person, but you want them to be able to know who is the essence of Victor Furman. What would you like this grandchild, for instance, to know about your life? What do you feel was most important in shaping you? What was your most important contribution? What were your most important values? What were the challenges you faced? And doing this really carefully so that you're not just talking about what a nice guy you were, but you're really giving this grandchild a picture of who you were and what your life was about. It can be an incredible gift to our descendants, but I think even more, it's a gift to us because it requires us to look at our lives in a way most of us don't look at our lives at any point, and certainly not when we end up getting, toward our 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. You mentioned the word forgiveness. One of the things that I found officiating funerals and memorial services is that many will come up to me after the service and say, I wish I had forgiven that person, or I wish I had asked them for forgiveness, or I simply wish I told them I loved them before they passed away. What do you say about forgiveness? Who is forgiveness for?
Forgiveness is more for the one who needs to do the forgiving than it is for the one forgiven. Forgiveness is so important because if we don't forgive and we are holding resentments, that is toxic. It's sapping our energy. The one who might need to be forgiven perhaps isn't even aware. I mean, that's way in the past. Maybe they're not even aware that they did something that needs to be forgiven. But here we are holding on to it and holding on to it. And I know I've had some important personal learnings about this myself, seeing how toxic it is to hold on to resentments and grudges when it's not serving anybody at all. And so, I've one of my original partners in this work, and many of the people who come on our retreats, it turns out, are people who have worked somehow in hospice. And they all say that it seems like the biggest factor in many people not being able to die a peaceful death is lack of forgiveness that they take all the way to their deathbed. And so very often, this lack of forgiveness is not about someone else, but it's about themselves. Certain resentments and grudges that they have carried about themselves and about things they have done or not done that have diminished their sense of joy and their sense of worth and their sense of being able to see the beauty in their lives. And so forgiveness is more for the forgiver than it is for the other one.
Absolutely. What is the Death Lodge practice, and how can it support conscious eldering?
Well, the Death Lodge practice is, I think, a practice that we do on our week-long Choosing Conscious Elderhood retreats, and we certainly encourage people to engage in their daily lives periodically. That many people find incredibly, incredibly powerful. It stems from a practice that my mentors told me that they learned from the Cheyenne people of the Plains states here in the Americas. And it's how among the Cheyenne, people prepared to die for that final passage. And the essence of it is that if someone really had a sense that the end was near, they would take care of whatever they needed to on the physical plane, in the village. But then they would go to a place called the Death Lodge on the edge of the village. And there they would do that work that was most critical, that they felt was most critical to prepare to meet their Creator. And, they would do their own inner work, their own prayer work, their own reviewing their life and honoring the life they have lived and what they have learned. But a critical part of it was that those who played important roles in their lives in the village, in the community, were invited to come one at a time to their death lodge. And there, the person who is nearing their death and the other one would have a final conversation, with an understanding that death was near for one of them. And they would talk about whatever was important to bring closure to their relationship. They would offer forgiveness to each other or ask for forgiveness if that was needed. They would acknowledge how important the other one was in their lives and express affection and gratitude. They would do whatever needed to be done so that there was true closure, so that then the one who was about to die could move forward, toward their final days, not carrying any unfinished business. And so in our work, we incorporate I guess you'd say, a modern day version of the Death Lodge practice, where people go and spend 2 or 3 hours in nature, imagining that they are in that kind of a death lodge, as I talked about, and imagining that the end of their life is near. And it may be for you, for me, for all of us. We don't know. It may be. So imagining that it is near, and we invite in spirit into our death lodge a person, or then a second person, if that feels right, to have a conversation in spirit, saying those things that absolutely need to be said between two souls, so that any old resentments can be cleared, so that appreciation and love can be expressed, so that there can be real closure. And I'll tell you, Victor, we have had some of the most incredible stories of healing when people have done this kind of death lodge work on one of our retreats, or we've heard stories how people, when they're at home. And sometimes the most incredible synchronicities happen, because it's not just people's experience of it isn't just, well, I'm just pretending I'm having a conversation with somebody in spirit. People experience it as a reality, that they are having a conversation soul to soul with another person, and great healing can happen in that. And I just love some of the stories I've heard about that. And so that, in essence, is what the Death Lodge practice is.
His book, the 10th anniversary edition of Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. We'll be back with more with Ron Pevny after these words on the Om Times Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human. And she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
This is the story of a very special woman. Just a few knew about her superpowers. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
You can't escape a traffic jam. Know what else you can't escape? Seasonal allergies. And you might think you can avoid that coffee stain until... Oh, really? You can't escape a lot of things in life, but you can escape prediabetes. Prediabetes captures 1 in 3 adults. There are usually no signs of prediabetes. In fact, most people don't even know they have it. But with early diagnosis, you can change the outcome and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Take action by taking the 1-minute risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. You might not be able to escape having this song stuck in your head, but you can escape prediabetes. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org today. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week, Ron Pevny. We're talking about the 10th anniversary edition of his book, Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. Ron, some feel a strong need to contribute to the world as they age, but also want to slow down and savor life, spend lots of time with family, and be reflective. It often feels these goals are at odds with each other. How can we best deal with that tension?
Well, Victor, it's all a matter of finding balance. I guess that's true with all of life. But I think that as we approach our elder years, we need to come to know ourselves. And again, I think this is part of becoming conscious, of really knowing ourselves well. We need to know what that particular balance is that's right for us. And it's not going to be the same for me as it is for you or for any one of your listeners. But they're both critically important, because elderhood, the life stage of elderhood, is very, very much about deepening our inner lives, deepening our spiritual lives, and seeing the sacredness and the beauty around us in small things, in ways that perhaps we couldn't do when our lives are all caught up in the bigger things, that are part of being younger. That's important. Savoring life, savoring each moment is critically important. But at the same time, and I think more so maybe in today's world than in a long, long time, elders have an obligation to somehow be contributing to the larger world around us. Elders have always had an obligation. The communities have always let it be known that the gifts of elders are needed. They're not just an option, they are needed. And so there's an obligation to find ways to give our gifts in ways that feel right to us, that don't somehow violate us, or we're not constantly putting pressure on ourselves, but ways that just kind of seem to want to flow from us, a natural outgrowth of who we are at this point in our life and what we've learned and who we've become. And so finding that balance is so important. And I know it can be really challenging for a lot of people, but I think a definition of elder that is really meaningful to me is one that I have heard from various wise mentors of mine, and that is you're an elder, and you've entered true elderhood if and when you get to a point where, when you get up each day, your strongest motivation is that today somehow I am going to grow and somehow I am going to be of service. It doesn't mean that's all you aspire to that day, but that's your strongest motivation. And if you're going to somehow grow and be of service, then I am quite confident that you're going to find a way to do it in a way that is truly balanced. But for so many people, I think, in today's world, who have not been blessed with, even exposure to some of these ideas about elderhood that I and others share, who don't have any kind of a vision for what elderhood can be, their strongest motivation when they get up is, how am I going to fill the hours? How am I going to maximize my security? And how am I going to get as much pleasure as I can possibly get? And that's a very, very different motivation. And so I think the best balance comes from having this motivation. How am I going to somehow grow, and how am I going to somehow serve? And from that, we're going to find ways to grow, to serve, to find some security, to find some joy, to find quiet, reflective time. We're going to find our own particular balance that can enable us to thrive as elders.
We had talked before about purpose. What about passion? Is passion the same as purpose?
You know, I think in common parlance, in common use of language, many people equate the two, Victor. But I see them as being a little bit different. Yeah, you know, I think oftentimes when somebody talks about passion, you know, like, I have a passion. I love to fly fish, okay? And I might say I have a passion for fly fishing or something like that. But to me, what passion is a life energy that is strong and flowing free in us, that we apply to specific areas of our life that are important to us. If we don't have this energy that I'm calling passion, of strong life energy flowing, then whatever we might enjoy or might want to put our energy into isn't going to be very empowered. There's not going to be that much energy. And so that's why, for me, living a life of passion really means doing those kind of things that support us having strong life energy. And I know one important question I think, and that we always share with the people in our retreats, is to ask, what are the things you do that sap your life energy? You know, what are you feeding yourself that is sapping your energy, as opposed to really supporting you having strong life energy and therefore strong passion? You know, you're feeding yourself a junk food diet, you know, a physical food. Are you feeding yourself a junk food diet of images and constantly surrounding yourself, you know, with the images of fear and crassness that surround us in the media? Or are you feeding yourself plenty of inspiring images and poetry? There's a whole list of things that we can do that can feed our passion, and a whole lot of other things we can do that can just sap our energy, so we don't have much of the energy of passion to apply to anything. Does that respond to your question, Victor?
Absolutely. Ron, what would you like readers to take away from Conscious Living, Conscious Aging?
I would like readers of that book, and I would like people who are listening to this interview to recognize that there are possibilities for their aging that are far beyond what the world around us tells us is possible. There is a vision for a whole life chapter that can be a time of fulfillment and purpose and growth and service that we can aspire to, even though that vision isn't the dominant vision in the world around us now. I'd like readers and listeners to know that to grow into the possibilities of this vision, into the elderhood that is possible, takes some effort. We have to be willing to stretch outside of our comfort zones. We have to be willing to live out, to stop living just out of habit, and to try to live more with more awareness and consciousness. It takes some work. But from all those I know who I feel have embodied the possibilities of elderhood, they'll all say it is so worth it. It is so very, very worth it. And so in my book, I paint a vision for what this elderhood can be, have plenty of practices and exercises and reflections and stories that can help people to see how they can make this vision a part of how they age if they choose to do so.
My guest is Ron Pevny. His book, the 10th anniversary edition of Conscious Living, Conscious Aging. Ron, one more time, please share with our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
Yeah, Victor, my book's available anywhere that books are available. I would just give one little note here. For various technical reasons that even I cannot understand, on places like Amazon, even though they have a picture of the cover of the new edition of my book, it says publication date 2014. Ignore that. They're going to receive the new edition. And they can get my book from my publisher, beyondwords.com. And in doing so, they really help to support the work that I and my colleagues do. People can learn about our work at centerforconsciouseldering.com.
Ron, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing this important wisdom for those of us who are of the golden years and really are seeking our purpose and great things to do as elders in this world. Thank you, Ron.
Well, thank you, Victor, for the opportunity, and I wish you and your good work well.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Furman. Have a wonderful week.